Speak through Fox News and let the independents who are tuning into you, let them know what it is that she stands for, the principles behind her positions.
It used to be that new candidates were advised to brush up on the issues so they could handle questions from anyone, even tough questions. The idea behind that was that it prepared you also for actually governing. But now the advice to candidates is only to talk to sympathetic reporters.
We need to start now by electing strong leaders who aren't afraid to shake it up. We need strong, principled leaders, public servants who respect our Constitution.
Pierce, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Our friends at AC360 with Soledad O'Brien.
All right, Piers, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Tonight, Sarah Palin takes aim at President Obama's State of the Union address and hits the old Soviet Union instead. President Obama called this our Sputnik moment. She says launching Sputnik ended up bankrupting the USSR. Does she have her facts straight? We're keeping them honest tonight. Tonight, Sarah Palin causing a storm for taking exception with President Obama's State of the Union address, but getting on our radar for kind of mangling history. Listen.
His theme last night in the State of the Union was the WTF, winning the future. And I thought, okay, that acronym, spot on. There were a lot of WTF moments throughout that speech.
WTF, in case you're wondering what that shorthand is for, it's for WTF. If you're a kid, ask your parents. They can explain. Parents, if you don't understand, go ask your children. They'll tell you. I can't help you. In any case, Governor Palin's taking some heat for that, but it's really a matter of taste and opinion. But keeping them honest, we're interested in the hard facts and what she said about this.
A half a century ago, when the Soviets beat us into space with the launch of a satellite called Sputnik, we had no idea how we would beat them to the moon. The science wasn't even there yet. NASA didn't exist. But after investing in better research and education, we didn't just surpass the Soviets. We unleashed a wave of innovation that created new industries and millions of new jobs. This is our generation's Sputnik moment.
So that was President Obama on Tuesday night. Now, here was the Palin reaction.
That was another one of those WTF moments, that when he has so often repeated this Sputnik moment that he would aspire Americans to celebrate. And he needs to remember that what happened back then with the former communist USSR and their victory in that race to space, yeah, they won, but they also incurred so much debt at the time that it resulted in the inevitable collapse of the Soviet Union.
Okay, it's a little hard to make much of that statement because she literally means that Sputnik bankrupted the Soviet Union and led to its collapse. Then, well, that makes no sense at all because Sputnik went up, if you remember, October 4th, 1957. The Soviet Union dissolved in December 1991, span of 34 years. That couldn't have bankrupted them. They still had money for a manned space program. So maybe, in fact, she's talking about the race into orbit.
Start. We will be with you, Thomas. Good Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Godspeed, John Glenn. John Glenn, the second to orbit the Earth, Yuri Gagarin was the first. That was 30 years before the USSR collapsed. That did not bankrupt them. They still had money for more space flight. So maybe, in fact, she's talking about this.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
That was a great speech. Lunar program, that could be a budget buster, of course. Hard numbers are hard to come by because the Soviet program was cloaked in secrecy. But according to NASA, our own manned space program cost about $23 billion from the first man in space to the last man on the moon. And according to a leading space historian, Soviet spending was just about half that amount. So it's hard to see how a space spending would be a major burden, especially when you consider all the other things they were spending money on. Funding Cuba, occupying Eastern Europe, invading Afghanistan, building the Berlin Wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
That was President Ronald Reagan, of course. 6 presidents, 3 decades after Sputnik went into orbit. Man, just a few days ago, she credited for the Soviet Union's end. Under his leadership, she writes in USA Today, we won the Cold War without firing a single shot or apparently launching a single rocket. More now on the facts and the politics of what Sarah Palin said with Democratic strategist Maria Cardona and Republican strategist Ed Rollins and also Stephen Cohen. He's professor of Russian Studies and History at New York University. He's also the author of The Victim's Return, Survivors of the Gulag After Stalin. Nice to see you all. Let's begin with you, Stephen, because I want to start with the history thing. That was
I do know what WTF is, because when I left home tonight,
I knew you did.
I asked my 19-year-old daughter, and she told me. So
Before the show,
I'm informed.
She filled you in. I'm glad to hear that. History 101. There's this big span of time, 34 years, between Sputnik and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So when Sarah Palin says, in fact, one was linked to the other, is that true?
I'm not a Palin fan.
I'm not asking you whether you are or not. I want to know if historically it's true or not.
It's not the dumbest thing that's been said about the end of the Soviet Union. I think what she wanted to say was that the Soviet Union spent so much money that it bankrupted itself and it ended, and that investments, as in Sputnik, were the beginning of that bankruptcy. That's wrong on two counts. First of all, actually, 1957, which Ed and I remember very well. I mean, and it was a scary moment.
I was 50.
We remember it because they made us, when it happened, they made all American school children study more math and science. And it was really a traumatic moment.
Getting my downfall.
That's how we ended up here. What Governor Palin said is wrong in two respects. First of all, actually 1957, when Sputnik went up, and for about the next 10 years, was the high point of the strength of the Soviet economy, both in terms of economic growth. It grew, I think, at about 6 or 7% a year, and its technological development. That's why the United States had such an allergic reaction. The reaction was, I think, oh my God, the communists can do it and we can't. Right. Something's wrong. We got to fix it. So she's wrong on that count. It wasn't bankruptcy, and it didn't lead to bankruptcy. The other thing she's wrong about is that the failure of the Soviet economy ended the Soviet Union. That, too, is not correct, but that's a different story. So what I would say is she's wrong on both accounts.
And that's sort of a dubious honor, isn't it, Ed Rollins? I mean, when you hear these remarks, and actually we report on them all the time, right. What do you think? Is it building the brand that Sarah Palin maybe for a presidential run, or what?
It clearly is showing that she has a lack of knowledge, which I think is unfortunate in a candidate, no matter how effective she may think she is. In this particular case, we didn't lose the space race. It was an extraordinary time for both the Soviet Union and for us. It was one of the greatest times of development, of research and development for the United States. And all these sidebar things that came, the computers, the lasers, all the rest of it, it was an extraordinary investment of resources and created a great engineering. I think if anything destroyed the Soviet Union, it was their attempt to expand throughout the world and their tremendous amount of resources devoted to military.
Maria, quick question for you about the brilliance of Sarah Palin, which is you can be totally wrong, and yet people devote segments talking about sort of what you're saying, even though we should be running a disclaimer. That was totally wrong.
That's exactly right, Soledad. You know, a lot of people like to think that she's crazy. I often say that she's crazy like a fox in terms of she knows that exactly what she's doing in terms of marketing her own brand. The question is whether she actually really wants to use that brand to run for president. I never thought that she really did, because these things that she says, which are completely WTF moments for us, don't help that brand in terms of having people taking her more seriously for running for president. But you said it. Look at what we're doing. We're devoting a whole panel talking about what she said. And to her supporters, that actually, I think, makes them love her more.
You have said, Maria, that you would love to see a Palin Bachmann ticket. And I won't go into what Michelle Bachmann said, which actually I almost fell off my couch laughing. Google it, because I don't have time to get to it. But it's so wrong in history, and I'm not a historian. It's just craziness.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that the two together, again, make us talk more about them than it does about the seriousness of conservative Republican ideas. And I think in that sense, and I think maybe Ed would agree with me here, and I know that other serious conservative Republicans agree, that she does not do the party any good. Well,
let's ask
she doesn't do the debate any
the man who knows about conservative Republican ideas.
The sad part is the president gave a speech that obviously was a very bipartisan speech. A lot of things that Republicans could agree on. Equally as important, sort of a new star of the Republican Party, Paul Ryan, gave the counter speech, and he's going to be a very important player here. He's the one that we should be talking about tonight, and yet we're talking about Sarah Palin saying something very stupid. And I think the key thing...
So his message is lost.
His message is lost, and she's not a part of the process today. She's a part of the sidebar. Michelle Bachmann obviously is a member of Congress and a representative of the Tea Party, but at the end of the day, we have to get our serious players out front and talking about things that matter to be the alternative to the president and the Democrats.
Ultimately, Professor Cohen, I always wonder, do historians just love... I mean, everyone's researching Sputnik. That's got to be pretty exciting for you.
Well, you know, a lot of... it's more autobiographical, as I said, and I remember when it went up, but a lot of things happened after that. You have to remember that in 1961, I think, the Soviet Union sent up the first man in space, a man by the name of Yuri Gagarin. That was actually considered more sensational than Sputnik, which Ed reminded me before. The broadcast weighed 20 pounds. That was about the size of a volleyball.
Right.
But when they sent a human being, this very brave Soviet astronaut, Gagarin, up, and he remains a hero in Russia today, that really brought it home, that they put a man in space. There's one other thing I would say as a historian and a biographer, because I've written biography. What television has done in the United States, and probably in other countries partly too, is confuse celebrity with political leadership. I mean, when you become famous and celebrated for something in politics, it's confused with leadership.
Perhaps we are not properly educating our youth in the exceptional nature of America. It's worrisome because this belief in American exceptionalism is something that every new generation has got to make its own if we expect our republic and our liberties to be secure and to live on. For America to survive, we have got to pass this on to that next generation, to the young kids who are here, to the students.
You know, this real America, does it exist, John?
Well, in terms of real American and exceptionalism, look, the most basic thing that people can do in support of a democracy is vote. And we take our votes very seriously. The people of Alaska voted for Sarah Palin, and Sarah Palin quit. Exceptional people don't quit. And I seriously tell my kids this probably 2 or 3 times a week. It's better to lose than to quit. So she can sit there and she can talk about being exceptional. She can talk about better of America. If she were a better person, she would have stood and fought. She chose to check out and to do it to make money. I've got no problem with making money, but that's what she is. She's a reality
I
star.
have a different observation, though. He hears what's going on. That speech, the first 20 minutes, was every vapid cliche strung together. It was complete, almost nonsense.
Suppose Senator John Doe puts forth a constitutional amendment that would outlaw abortion, even in cases of rape or incest, and he asked you to attend the announcement and support him in that. Would you do it?
I would. Yes, a proposal like that, I would stand by it.
Let's be completely clear about the facts here. There is no place in the world and no time in history where restricting women's reproductive rights makes a people or a nation more free or more equal. These extreme positions on abortion are, without any question, a war on American girls and women, and the fact that there are women who are both complicit and participatory in it is really neither surprising nor unprecedented. It has always been true, and it is incredibly important that we recognize that despite the fact that we can be very proud of these women and as politicians, that the question is, how do women as citizens fare on the other side of them either being elected or not elected?
I'll only bring it up because you guys brought it up. Is Sarah Palin important in this race? Obviously, Joe Miller is her candidate of choice.
I think it hurts him more than it helps him. I mean, you know, she does have really low numbers, and people that did support her and walked door to door in the snow. I mean, you think it's cold now? You wait a month. People walked door to door for her to get her elected, and she quit. And there's a lot of things you can do in Alaska, but you can't quit. You can't run dogs and quit. You can't row a boat and quit. You won't survive here if you're a quitter. It's an Alaskan value. So even people that are still conservative, still they see her as a quitter.